Of a superstar as a MLTI graduate, and he's now a music education major at the University of Maine at Orono. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Ben so he can introduce Senator King.
Great. So as John said, I went through Yarmouth High School and I graduated through the MLTI program. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and I'm more excited to get to introduce Senator King. I started to work with Senator King a few years into high school, and I've gotten to do some really great work with him and done some presentations with him, and I know he's going to have a lot of really great things to say. So without further ado, Senator King.
Well, good evening and welcome to Maine from Washington. I'm in the basement of the U.S. Capitol. We're in the middle of a very busy week. Just this afternoon, the U.S. Senate passed a funding bill that carries our government's operations through to October 1st, which is the beginning of the next fiscal year. And it may not sound like much of an accomplishment, but the way we've been working around here in the last few years, it absolutely is an accomplishment, and it was done a week before the deadline. Now, it's not all done yet. We still have to have the bill that passed the Senate was different than the one that passed the House of Representatives, so it has to go back over to the House of Representatives, but we're hopeful that that's not going to take long and that that'll be taken care of either tonight or tomorrow. Now we're on to talking about the budget for 2014. And in fact, the debate is going on just above our heads on the Senate floor here in the Capitol, and I'm told it's going to be going all night. In fact, I was just asked to preside over the Senate between 12 and 2 a.m. tonight. So if you guys are really bored and having trouble sleeping, turn on C-SPAN, which is our channel that broadcasts Congress, and you'll see hopefully something going on the Senate floor. If not, maybe they'll change their minds and we'll get back into it first thing tomorrow. But in any case, I'm delighted to be able to join you. I've joined, I think, every one of these conferences almost always in person, so I appreciate your willingness to accommodate me electronically. And I understand the delegation is from Sweden. Is Avi there? Avi Lindström? No. He's not there this year?
Nope.
Well, if some of you from Apple are there, would you please give him my warmest regards. I've met with him. I've been to Stockholm and down on the coast, and I've had a wonderful visit to Sweden to talk about the project. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of our laptop project, of our digital learning initiative. But I hope that part of your trip, and I certainly expect that part of your trip will be to join a classroom either today or tomorrow to see the project in action. That's really what you have to see. That's what sells it. We can talk about it, but when you see the kids and you see the teachers and the interactions that are going on, that's what's really important. Let me share a couple of thoughts about this. Number one, what we're really talking about is a very fundamental change in the way we have traditionally done education, both in America, in Europe, and indeed around the world. If you stop and think about it, a time traveler from the year 1500 could walk into a classroom today in Stockholm or in New York or in Maine or in just about anywhere else and feel very much at home, because the pedagogical style, the education style, has not changed that much in 500 or 1,000 years. It consists of a well-educated, smart person standing in front of a classroom full of students and essentially disgorging information to the students, sharing and conveying information, conveying content, whether it's the modern history of political history of Europe or over here American history or chemistry or biology or whatever, but it's about giving content through the teacher and the textbook, which then the student learns, often memorizes, and then a test comes and the student spits back onto the test what they've learned. I believe we are entering an entirely new age of education that's fundamentally different than that model. And we have to think differently about what the challenges are of the 21st century and how education needs to work. Instead of content, what we need to teach our students is process. How to find and use and evaluate information on their own for solving problems. In that situation, the teacher becomes more of a coach than a pedagogue, than a lecturer. And certainly that's part of the education process. But today, we live in a world of instant access to massive amounts of information, far greater than anything we've ever experienced before in world history. And you can discover just about anything in a very short period of time on Google or elsewhere on the internet. And so the real challenge isn't getting information, it's understanding it, sorting it out, learning what's good information and not good information, and then using that to solve problems. Also, one of the great skills of the 21st century is partnership, collaboration, working together. Now, I don't know about schools in Sweden, but in the US, collaborating, sharing information, and joining together to solve problems is called cheating. That's how you get expelled from school, and yet those are precisely the tools that we want 21st century students to have. So we really need to think differently about how education happens. And the laptop, you notice I've talked now 7 minutes without mentioning the word laptop or computer. The laptop is simply the tool that allows us to make this fundamental shift in the educational process because it's the portal to all that information. And the reason we chose to do one-to-one in Maine is that we wanted our students to have access to information on a continuous basis, and we wanted that information and the power that the laptop brings to be integral to the daily learning process. Not something that you do once a week, not something that you do sharing in the classroom. It's something that you do consistently day by day, and so the tool becomes an extension of your body. I know Sweden, as Maine, is a great hockey country, and I am absolutely sure that your great hockey players don't get that way by going to hockey clinic for 42 minutes a week and having to share a stick among 20 students once a day. You get good at anything by doing it a lot and by doing it so that it's second nature. And that's the way we wanted our students to interact with technology, that it's second nature, and then they can take it to the next level. Now, perhaps I could have started with this thought, but I wanted to give you the big picture first. The next question is, why did we do it? Why did Maine do this now more than 10 years ago? And the answer is a combination of education, but a lot of economic development, frankly. I was the governor of Maine from 1995 to 2003. And I came to realize that I didn't know, and in fact, it wasn't just realize, I realized in a kind of pit of my stomach way, it scared me that I couldn't predict what the jobs of the future would be. And again, I suspect this is true in Sweden as well as in the US. When you grew up in the 50s or 60s or even the 70s, the economy was what it was, and you could be pretty sure that what you were learning in school would make sense for the job that you were going into, whether it was an office job or a factory job or a professional job. Today, we don't know what the economy of the future looks like. In fact, just 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, nobody had ever heard of web design. Nobody had ever heard of social media. Nobody had ever heard of Google. Nobody had ever heard we barely knew what the internet was. So there are an enormous number of jobs that have been created by virtue of this new technology. And the point I'm making is, how do you prepare people for jobs that you don't even know what they're going to be? And my thinking was that we don't know what the jobs of the future will be, but we can know two things. The jobs of the future will almost always involve more education than has been the case in the past. And secondly, the jobs of the future will almost certainly involve technology and the utilization of technology. Well, once we realized that, back in 1999 and 2000, when this idea was gestating, then it became a question of, okay, education and technology, that leads you to computers. And our first idea, you'll enjoy this, was desktops on every desk. And we had a meeting at the governor's residence up in Augusta, and I had a meeting with a group of educators, with teachers, principals, tech people, and I was very proud of myself. And I said, how about this idea? Every student will have a desktop computer on their desk. And the teachers rolled their eyes and gnashed their teeth and said, this will never work, Governor, because we need those desks. We need that space for something other than a big box on top of it. And one of the teachers raised her hand and said, why not a laptop? Because then you can use it in the classroom. When you're not using it, you can fold it up and put it in the desk, and you can take it home. Everybody looked at each other and said, bingo. I don't know what the word is in Sweden for bingo, but it's eureka. That's the idea. That's the idea. And that's how it went from being a desktop. Plus everybody said, what about all the wires you'd have to have for a desktop? That wouldn't work with 20 or 30 students in the classroom. So we started talking about laptops. But the idea, the fundamental idea, was to make our citizens among the most well-educated and digitally literate group of people on earth. Because I had learned as governor, and I'm sure governors and prime ministers and members of parliament in Sweden had exactly the same motivation. If you want economic development to happen, new jobs, new businesses, it's not all about taxes, it's not all about regulations. What businesses were telling me was, we want well-trained, well-educated people. That's what businesses look for. And I talked to businesses across America. And so, again, the theory was pretty simple. Let's provide every child with a laptop from 7 through 12, produce a group of highly educated, digitally literate citizens, and that in itself will be helpful in economic development. Now, several things happened. And I want to tell you a bit about our project and what we've learned, and perhaps some suggestions for you to have similar projects, and perhaps not make some of the mistakes that we made, and also to learn some of the things that we did right. The first thing that I would urge you, and if you forget everything else I've said tonight, it's all about professional development. If you simply hand out laptops to the students and the teachers and think that this is a technology project, a hardware project, and you've done your job and magical, wonderful things will happen, the project will almost certainly fail. Because remember in the beginning, we're asking our teachers to teach in a fundamentally different way, a different way than they've taught before. And people don't change easily. And they have to be nurtured and taught and educated and brought along as to how to do this. With some teachers, you're going to start with how to turn it on, how to use Word, how to use email, how to get to the internet. I think we're well beyond that now, but 10, 12 years ago, that was the beginning. But the real challenge, and the reason you're here, and I hope what you pick up over the next few days, is how to integrate digital technology into the day-to-day learning in the classroom. And that's not something that comes easily or naturally, and there are people working on this all over the world. And you're going to meet some of the best educators in the world who have figured this out. But the important thing, the message to take back, is we have to start with professional development. Before the first computer was handed out in Maine, before the first laptop went to the first teacher or student, we spent almost $1 million preparing the teachers. And I believe that was the single most important thing that we did that led to what has been a very successful project. Here's another way to think about it. If I handed out at the inn tonight a set of violins without any instruction, and tomorrow morning I said, okay, let's play a little Bach concerto, it would sound pretty awful. The only way you learn to make the violin sing is through education, through training, there's my phone going off. Unless it's the president, I'm not going to answer. But you're not going to get the great music from that violin without training the people who are using it. The same thing goes for a laptop. It's an instrument. It's a tool. And the training is critically important. A couple of other lessons that we learned. I don't know whether you're representing whole states or provinces, school districts or what, but one of the things that we did right, that we didn't realize at the time how right we were, was to have a consistent platform and one vendor. The project consists of training, of network, of devices, of support, of technical support and repair, all of those pieces. And it's tempting to save money by saying we're going to bid out the training, we're going to bid out the network, we're going to bid out the device, and therefore when you add it all up, it's going to be less than if we just go with one vendor who has to do the whole thing. That's a mistake. The business principle that I applied, that I've always thought was a good idea, is that you want one throat to choke. One throat to choke. Which means, if something goes wrong, you don't want the network people pointing at the device people and somebody else pointing at the tech people. You want it all integrated, and if it doesn't work, you go to the vendor and say, something's not working, fix it. That, I think, was an important aspect of the way we did this project. Flowing out of that, the other piece is you want a partner, not just a vendor. Because these projects are not easy, and they're complex, and they involve a lot of everything, the mundane things of, do you replace your batteries, or what happens if the software doesn't properly integrate, or whatever the issues are. They're going to be issues. And you don't want somebody who strictly has a contractual relationship with you, but no real stake in the success of the project. And I think that's very important. Now, I'm not advertising for Apple, but I will say that Apple was our partner in Maine, not just a vendor. And they sent people here to provide the tech support, to provide the repairs, to provide a lot of the training and professional development. And that was a crucial part of our success. So I'm not telling you who to hire, but I am telling you you should think about the relationship that you're entering into and who's going to be your partner, who will be there 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now as you're making this thing work. The final thing I want to touch on is results, and then perhaps we can have a few questions, and then I'll let Ben McNabo give his presentation, which I think you're going to enjoy. The issue about results. Don't go home and promise higher test scores. The first thing you should do is warn everybody that it takes 4 years to really see concrete results, because that's how long it takes for the teachers to get comfortable with this new way of doing education. But the second thing is, and I don't know about your standardized tests in Sweden, but in Maine, our standardized tests are, they're about 1978, 1985. In other words, we're trying to test 21st century skills with 1985 test approaches. And the standardized tests don't measure what the laptops give. They don't measure ability to find information in a hurry. They don't measure ability to use information. They don't measure collaboration. They measure memorization. That's the old model. And the example I use is if you ask 2 sets of students, one with laptops, one without, when did Columbus discover America? You'll get roughly equivalent answers, 1492, and you'll probably get 85 or 90% accuracy from both groups. But then if you say, tell me what kind of wood was used to construct Christopher Columbus's ships, the laptop kids can get you that information in about 10 seconds. The kids on their own devices without laptops can't give you that answer at all. So we have to think about what the assessment is in order to determine whether you're making progress. Now, we have done assessments in Maine that show very significant measurable progress in writing. That's the clearest thing, and you can promise that because the kids write more, they edit more, and they're just much more comfortable with the written word, and the results in writing are noticeable and in fact dramatic. We also have results on mathematics. If you have well-trained teachers, we see statistically significant improvements in mathematics skills. And I don't know what, I'm not as current on the testing and the results regime as I was a few years ago, but I suspect we're starting to see more and more positive results. But I think this is one of those things that right now, looking back 10 years ago, seems obvious. It wasn't obvious at the time. I can tell you it was very controversial politically. I took a terrific beating as the governor who suggested this. I remember one email that said, "This is the stupidest idea any politician has ever had. What are you smoking?" And a lot and that was a mild one. There were plenty that were even worse than that. It was very controversial. Now, not so much. And I suspect if there was a poll in Maine, it would be, 60, 70, 75% favorable, particularly among those parents, students, and educators who have had experience with it. So that's the story of our project. I think this is where education is going. Now, as you may know, as you've probably learned, Maine is going through one of our quadrennial refurbishment of this project. We started with Apple, I think they were called MacBooks. No, PowerBooks. Then we went to MacBooks, and the debate that's now going on in Maine, I understand, is whether the next generation of devices should be tablets or stay with laptops. And there's plenty to discuss, and I'm sure you will have that discussion yourself. And I could see advantages and disadvantages both ways. But that's where we are, and I'm delighted to welcome you. You're you're at the Brunswick Inn by the station. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a block from my house, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. But I must say you're having a lot more snow up there than we are. And all I can say is I'm glad this isn't a delegation from Australia, because they'd be a little thrown off by the snow. I suspect a delegation from Sweden feels right at home. But we're delighted to have you. And John, I don't know how you want to proceed. You want to have a few questions and then go to Ben, or I'm at your disposal. But again, welcome to Maine. Tusen tak for being with us, and we're delighted to have you.
Yes, let's... So I think we will try to do a few questions. Angus, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. Questions for Senator King?
Come on.
I should tell you, while somebody thinks of a question, some of these folks arrived at 3 a.m. this morning, and some of them didn't arrive until 3:30 this afternoon and missed most of the first day. So there is some travel weariness. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
Do you know what Columbus ships were made of?
I didn't hear it, John. You're going to have to relay that.
Yeah. Do you know what wood Columbus ships were made of?
I've never Googled it, but I will.
I guess it's fine.
Other questions? Seeing none, Senator King. Thank you.
Are you happy with the results so far from the project?
Are you happy with the results so far from the MLTI project?
Yes, and that's a very good question, because of course when you're assessing anything like this, you have to talk about it in terms of its cost. And it's very important to have a perspective on what a program costs in order to determine whether it's worth it and whether you're getting the value that you expected. And many people, I suspect, if you surveyed people in Maine and asked them how much the laptop project cost as a percentage of the education budget, you'd get some pretty high numbers, 5, 10, 15%. The fact is that the laptop project, the middle school laptop project, is about $9 million a year, and the total school budget in Maine is about $2.5 billion. And so what we're talking about is less than 0.5% of the overall school budget. And when you look at it that way, I think it's been a stunning success. Because even if all we did was improve writing, if someone came to you and said, we're going to significantly, 25, 50% improve the writing skills of your students for 0.5% of your budget, most of you would say, where do I sign up? And I think the benefits are much greater than that. So yes, I think it has been successful. You're going to be talking to a lot of people in Maine over the next couple of days. You'll have to ask them that question. I should say the success is uneven. It's not uniform, and it goes back to what I said before. It depends on the teachers. And there are schools where it is absolutely wonderful and doing spectacular things, and there are other schools and other classrooms where it's not doing very much. And so that gets back to the question of leadership and professional development, which are crucial elements. And by the way, the professional development is not just for the teachers. It's for the principals and the tech coordinators as well, because it's the leadership in the school that really, we found in our experience, makes all the difference. If you have a principal who doesn't care, who thinks it's a pain in the neck, who would rather deal with other things, it's not going to work. So you have to have, the term we use, you have to have everybody invested in the success of the project. But I'll tell you, in many areas of Maine, particularly some of our smaller schools in rural areas, it has really been very successful. And I know that because I have teachers come up to me on the street and say, I thought you were crazy, but now I can't imagine teaching any other way. And I believe you'll find that with a lot of teachers, a lot of educators in Maine. So I think, yes, it has been successful, particularly when judged against its relatively low cost.
Any other? Yes.
How do other states and regions look at what you've accomplished in Maine now?
How do other states and regions look at what has been accomplished in Maine at this point?
Well, there were several other states that embarked on similar projects. I'm not sure where they stand. I think they made some mistakes, frankly, and I talked to them, and most politicians think of this as a hardware project. And they think they're done when they buy the boxes. And they don't do the professional development, so the projects haven't been that successful. On the other hand, scattered around America, in communities, school districts, schools, counties, there are projects that have been very, very successful. I don't think there are any other states who have gone into it to the extent Maine has. And frankly, part of this was the timing of the financial circumstances. We started this project at the end of the great economic expansion of the 90s in the U.S. After we got going, and remember I mentioned it was going to be 7 through 12, the reason it's only 7 and 8 was we ran out of money. And a lot of states looked at what we did, they said, gee, we would love to do that, but we don't have any money because we've been in this decline for the last 10 years, a kind of slow motion recession that seems to keep hanging on. So budgets, public budgets have been very constrained, so that very few, no other state has said we're going to do it the whole way that Maine did. But it has been done in a lot of communities in different areas across the country, and generally if it's done right, it's been very successful.
So, thank you again, Senator King.